So we have all concluded as men that there is a serious problem with the over-feminization of our society and the destructive force that it has placed on all of our society. And it's a major problem. Now, anecdotal evidence is one thing, but when someone has studied it, written books about it in great detail, and that person is a woman, hey, I got to show it. Because this woman here, Miss Helen Andrews, have broken it down to its finest detail, and she explains it beautifully here as she spoke at this National Conservatism event. So, my friends, I'm going to play quite a bit of what she has to say because it's highly important. And then I'm going to follow it up with sort of that street view, the down-to-earth view on some of the consequences that we have been warning women about just by not having a man in order to balance the scale of social cohesion. When women are integrated into a society to the point where it's all about a gynocentric view, a female view of the world, it's a recipe for disaster. And this woman breaks it down so nicely. So let's get into it. I'm gonna try not to interrupt her too much, but hey, I got to put in my 2 cents worth, right?
The libertarian economist Tyler Cowen once wrote a blog post describing all of the revolutions he's seen in the course of his lifetime, starting with the moon landing when he was a little boy and going up chronologically to today's advent of AI. And there were only 7 revolutions on this list because this was only the greatest and most earth-shaking ones. And right there, between the fall of communism and the invention of the internet, was something called the Great Feminization. That is not a phrase that a lot of Americans know, but future historians may well rank it as having greater importance than almost any other revolution on that list. The Great Feminization is very easy to define. It refers to the increasing representation of women in all of the institutions of our society. But as simple as it is to define, it's very difficult for those of us on the other side of that revolution to fully grasp its significance. The first thing that most people fail to understand about it is how unprecedented it is in human history. Caring, and men have an ethics of justice. In making a moral judgment, men will ask, what are the rules and what are the facts? Women tend to be more interested in context and relationships. So let's apply that to wokeness. When James Damore wrote his famous, or I should say notorious memo for Google, arguing that female underrepresentation in the hard sciences might not be the result of bias and prejudice, no one even attempted to argue that he was wrong on the facts. The reason that he was fired was because the things he had written might make his female coworkers feel bad. Or consider the Kavanaugh hearings. The masculine position was to say that maybe something bad happened to you, but if you do not have evidence, then we can't allow you to ruin a man's life and career over it. The feminine position was to say, how can you talk about rules of evidence? Can't you see she's crying? Now, to be clear, many women were revolted by the way the Kavanaugh hearings played out. In fact, the very best book on the Kavanaugh hearings was written by 2 women, Molly Hemingway and Carrie Severino. But a political system in which men predominate will tend to operate according to rules of facts and objectivity, and one in which women predominate will tend to operate by the rules of emotions and subjective facts.
Wow. You know, I always thought that it has always been a society that was run by men. But apparently there were some previous histories that were actually feminized. But obviously they never survived. So I think the pendulum seems to just keep swinging from left to right. So today I want to highlight 3 different ladies who are warning us about the problems of making women appear like they're in charge. Now, one of the biggest issues that we have and the argument we have to support women being in charge is that they're more ethical and they're more passive and they're sweeter and they're much more caring for humans. They're more nurturing to kids, right? But we know that that's not true as men. We know that. But when men speak up and tell other women that that's not the way they are, and we know the difference, there's a massive pushback. We're misogynists, we're this. We're given the whole shaming language. And for that reason, I brought in another psychologist, another woman, another doctor who's also showing you the true nature of females.
Completely blind ourselves to the growing prevalence. We don't want to admit how easily certain temperaments go out of control. What happens when they're left untamed? What happens when excessively neurotic women are not taught to emotionally regulate? We're trained to think that women are so harmless. They're just innocent creatures, just full of good impulses. No, they can wreak havoc, and we're not doing anything to prevent them to spiral into pathology. Welcome back to Psychobabble, where we expose bad therapy and the narratives that contribute to our poor mental health. I'm Hannah Spear. Today we're going to talk about pathological female behavior, the cluster B pathologies, because we are surrounded by the wreckage they cause.
I don't know what you want from me.
All over the internet, you can see viral videos of grown women throwing tantrums in public.
Okay, go. Let go. You didn't let me get my moment, so I want to say my name is Khadija Diallo, and I'm graduating today.
And whenever I speak about this, people come out and they say, this is exactly my sister, my partner, my children. There's so many people suffering from this. And the irony is that the prevalence of all the different mental disorders is rising. We hear about it all the time. We're in a mental health crisis. But somehow the rise in cluster B pathologies that we feel all around us is not reflected in the research. Somehow, the official prevalence of cluster B has not been updated for 2 decades. The irony is that psychiatrists and psychologists are very quick to diagnose high-functioning individuals with mental health disorders.
There's a very distinct reason for that. And we're going to now switch back to Helen. And she will describe to you the reason why we're in this position. Because you have to understand who are running these departments.
An ethics of caring, and men have an ethics of justice. In making a moral judgment, men will ask, what are the rules and what are the facts? Women tend to be more interested in context and relationships. So let's apply that to wokeness. When James Damore wrote his famous, or I should say notorious memo for Google, arguing that female underrepresentation in the hard sciences might not be the result of bias and prejudice, no one even attempted to argue that he was wrong on the facts. The reason that he was fired was because the things he had written might make his female coworkers feel bad. Or consider the Kavanaugh hearings. The masculine position was to say that maybe something bad happened to you, but if you do not have evidence, then we can't allow you to ruin a man's life and career over it. The feminine position was to say, how can you talk about rules of evidence? Can't you see she's crying? Now, to be clear, many women were revolted by the way the Kavanaugh hearings played out. In fact, the very best book on the Kavanaugh hearings was written by 2 women, Molly Hemingway and Carrie Severino.
For those of you that don't know the Kavanaugh hearing, this was Judge Kavanaugh, who was facing nomination for the position of being a Supreme Court judge in America, went through this incredible scrutiny. And apparently there were rumors of him essaying a woman back in the day, 20, 30 years prior. And a couple of women came forward and they were crying. But of course, there was no evidence of it at all. But of course, a lot of women, a lot of the feminists did not want him nominated because of the accusations alone. Not for the evidence, but for the accusations. And this is what a lot of men are feeling today, is they are the victims of female accusation, and they're condemned for that, not because of the evidence, but for the accusation. My video last night where I highlighted the DoorDash girl. Immediately, a lot of women jumped on it because just because another woman accused the man, they believe her until a couple of days ago, then that woman was arrested for lying. Go and watch that video if you haven't watched it yet. But this is the society that we're now currently operating in.
But a political system in which men predominate will tend to operate according to rules of facts and objectivity, and one in which women predominate will tend to operate by the rules of emotions and subjective facts.
And that is a fact. Tend to. In other words, the possibility of it happening is much greater than it not happening, because that's how women operate. So now we are living in a society of feelings over facts. Red pill spaces have been preaching this from day one. A woman is always in her feelings, red pillars, and men have been telling women, we cannot keep relying on your feelings. It's not the recipe for a conducive and a society that works in harmony. And this is playing out in absolute clear detail in today's society where women are literally crashing and burning.
I mean, over 20% of women in the UK are on antidepressant, and just under half of all women, again in the UK, are on some kind of psychotropic medication, whether that's antidepressants or antipsychotics or anti-anxiety medications or mood stabilizers or what have you. They're the most medicated people on earth, and they're plagued by body image issues in the societies that supposedly liberated them from objectification. 13% of women have contemplated suicide because of how they look or how they feel about how they look, and 10% of them have actually self-harmed because of the negative feelings they have about how their bodies look. 15% of women in the UK have eating disorders because of feeling that they don't fit to the societal beauty standards, which is just another way of saying that they feel that they're coming up short when being objectified. Well, that's not rejection of objectification, that's capitulation to it. And speaking of objectification, the countries of the West, Europe, the UK, the United States, and so on, these are the top producers and consumers of pornography in the world. The number of women in the UK who have reportedly entered into prostitution has doubled over the past year or so since the cost of living crisis has hit Europe because of the Ukraine war and the sanctions against Russia. Put that in perspective. The median income of the poorest people in the UK is roughly 15,000 sterling pounds per year. The median income in Malaysia is 2,000 pounds less than that. But supposedly, being so poor as to earn 2,000 pounds more than the average Malaysian is enough to drive women in the UK into prostitution. And Malaysia is not an impoverished nation. And this is the average, the median income for the whole country, not for the poorest segment of the country. But in your society, the economic system apparently requires women to rent their bodies out to men for sex in order to be free, independent, liberated women financially. No, you can't cope with modernity. You can't cope.
They've been told not to respect men's opinion. That man's opinion is based on logic, reasoning, not on feelings. Everything is about I don't feel. None of her decisions are based on facts or reasoning. And we must conform to her feelings. And of course, this is translated to men, and we are told as men that we have to be more emotionally intelligent. In other words, we must get into our feelings, and we must come on board with making decisions based on our feelings, not based on facts. It's freaking insane.
So companies and institutions give jobs to women that they would not otherwise have gotten, give women promotions that they would not have otherwise gotten, and in a pinch they create jobs that did not need to exist, involving PowerPoint slides, just to get their numbers up. This is why HR departments exist and why they promote gender diversity so assiduously, not because they're ideologues, although they are, obviously, but because they are protecting their company from lawsuits. Anti-discrimination law also mandates that the culture of every workplace be feminized, because if the atmosphere of your workplace is too brash or competitive or combative, that is also a lawsuit waiting to happen, because it is an indication that your workplace is not sufficiently welcoming to women. That is why HR departments are so zealous about policing every interaction and every communication and making sure none of it has any rough edges. So that's agenda item number 1. Get rid of all the HR ladies. Who's with me? Just fire them. And then we'll see how it shakes out.
Woo! You imagine if men said that. Oh, man. Man, it's just so weird that we're in this position where I actually have to say, imagine if a man said that. Do you understand how bizarre that is? That men have to police their speech. I've been trying to help this other 40-year-old lady with a relationship. And because I was just very blunt and straightforward with her, she came back with me. She was all upset. She didn't respond for a couple of days. And she said, I didn't respond for a couple of days. But she said, to be honest, I was really upset with what you had said about, my position and where I am as a 40-year-old. And she started to describe how she's different from the rest of the women that I know, and I cannot speak for all women, blah, blah, blah. And then she proceeds to describe every single thing that every 40-year-old have ever freaking told me. I've worked on myself. I have standards. I don't have to settle. I don't need a man who's XYZ. It's like... And I just responded, listen, it doesn't matter how I respond to you. You're going to get upset. I will just let it go. You can go off and do your thing. I don't think I can help you. I pretty much just said, you're no different from any other woman. And I know you're not going to like that, but it's the truth. And that was it in a nutshell. So I just let her go her way, let her do her thing, because it just don't make any sense. Because we've reached to this point in our society where a lot of women think that their way of thinking is the ideal and only way that everybody should freaking adhere to her. And because we have a society that caters to her understanding, to her pathology, and to her speech, this is what we end up with. Women who just can't listen to men.
If your company has too few women, that might indicate that you have a problem with your recruiting pipeline. On the other hand, it might not. Either way, we're not going to send a team of lawyers after you to second guess you. It's funny, HR departments are always so careful about making sure the atmosphere at the workplace is welcoming to women. I wonder if they ever considered that maybe their soggy, conflict-averse, nicey-nice atmosphere might not be welcoming to men. The other thumb on the scale, obviously, is the two-income trap. Women pursue careers because they have to for their families to attain a middle-class standard of living. If we address that through various other policies to make it possible for families that want to have one earner to do so, I think the problem of feminization will subside on its own as individuals make different choices based on what's best for their own families. That's just my prediction. Maybe I'm wrong. Let's get rid of the two-income trap and give people the choice, and then we'll see what happens. In conclusion, feminization is a sensitive topic. I am acutely aware of the sensitivities because I am, of course, myself a woman. I very much enjoy being a writer, and I would never want to discourage another woman from pursuing the path that I have followed. On the other hand, I am also someone with a lot of disagreeable opinions. So if society becomes more conformist and less welcoming to ideas that are controversial or unpopular, I'm also going to have a hard time of it. The important thing to remember is that it's not about what's best for me personally. It's about what's best for the society I live in and the society my children are going to grow up in. So my final exhortation to all of you is that we should all consider this difficult topic unselfishly, not from the perspective of what's to our individual advantage, but from the perspective of what's best for all of us.
These 3 videos that I'm examining today are all excellent. And the last one I'm going to approach is this young lady here. Her name is Carmen JC. I've featured her before, but this one is entitled Chicago is Finished and You Are Not Ready for What's Happening. And this basically highlights the reality on the ground. So we've looked at the academic way of looking at the problems with feminism. I've shown you some clips on how messed up women can be, right? Now we're going to see what happens when men are out of the picture and women are raising kids. Because Chicago had an incident the other day which I would never have seen in my lifetime, where a woman was attacked with her child by other young kids. Think about that shit. I don't know how many of you in America have seen this, but more than likely, this was never shown on international news. But this is a clear demonstration on what happens when there's no men in the freaking home right here.
Welcome back to the channel. Today, we're going to be talking about Black people behaving badly again. Yesterday, we talked about how Black people have hit a new level of degeneracy. And I'm here to tell you today that they have upped the ante. They're doing even more things, and it just gets more disgusting by the day. But no one wants to take this serious. No one thinks that we have a problem. And I want you guys to go ahead and look at this video. It's very disgusting of these children. They're going to assault a mother and her children. And we can talk about it later, but I want you guys to go ahead and take a look at this video really quickly, and then we'll talk. So let's go ahead and take a look at this first video clip. Take a look.
Come on, blood. Shamar looking at Shamar. Come here. What you want, Shamar? Shamar, foot. What you want, Shamar? Shamar looking at. Come on. Look at them ankles, bud. Shamar looking at. Junior. Why does my son? Hey, foot, don't touch my brother, foot. Why? Don't touch me. Oh, hell no, those ankles asses. The little kids in them, not the big kids. The big kids not touching them. I'm saying the little kids. Smash that.
All right, so as you can see that a mother is walking her two children to school. I believe the little boy was 9, and I believe she had a 5-year-old daughter, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm hearing people allege that she's pregnant as well.
Well, the problem with the Black community is that they are the direct result of the feminization of our society. The Black community grabbed the whole feminization, the matriarchal way of looking at life, and they ran with it faster than the whites did. They pushed that whole narrative of strong, independent Black woman to the point where they almost completely alienated their own men. They have pushed so many Black men out of the home that there is absolutely no discipline in the home anymore, no control over the kids, because a mother cannot discipline her kids as effective as a man can. This is the problem. So now we get out of control kids.
I didn't show you the actual attack. We're going to take a look at the news coverage in a second where they'll show you a little bit more. But I just want to say how dysfunctional the Black community is, how dysfunctional the Black community have become. And we're not being held accountable. This type of behavior should never happen. The lack of respect for your elders, the fact that you're going to beat up the kid, you're going to bully the kid and the parent, and it's like a crowd of them, and it's just so disgusting. No one is talking about how the lack of morality have raised in the community. We have zero morality. We don't have values. We don't have anything. And then you guys think that people are jealous of the Black community, that people care about the Black community. Why would anyone have to do anything to the Black community when the Black community destroys itself? Okay. And I'm telling you, it's these women. It is the women and their children. And this is one of those cases where it's their children. Where are the parents? And I guarantee we're not going to hear the mothers come out and say, you know what, my child is not like this, or my child is going to be held accountable for this, or I had no recollection of this. This mother is actually walking her children to school. And then you have these mothers that just let them go out the door. They don't teach them any type of morals, values. They don't teach them any type of way to have decorum or respectability towards their peers. And it's disgusting. I went to a lot of Black schools and I know how Black people behave. So you're not going to tell me that I'm gaslighting anyone or that I'm exaggerating.
There's no accountability there. If a man was walking his child home from school, you think a bunch of these little nitwits can attack a man? No, they wouldn't. They wouldn't even dare. So the woman has no protection. None.
No, this behavior is beyond demonic, okay? And at this point, these kids need to be put under the jail. Okay, it's like no hope for the youth of Chicago because of behavior like this. And I want to go ahead and take a look at the news coverage on that because you'll be able to see a little bit more of the footage. So let's go ahead and take a look at what the news had to say about this situation.
Outrage in South Deering after a mother and child attacked on their way home from school. Casey Cronus is live outside of Orville Wright Elementary School with the very latest on this story. Casey, what can you tell us?
Hi, Sylvia. This video is heartbreaking to see. That woman, a 33-year-old, says she was walking her 9-year-old son home from school when they were jumped by a group of kids. And we need to warn you, the video is difficult to watch. We have frozen it before things escalate. Chicago police are now investigating after the woman named Korshonda and her son were viciously attacked near 106th and Bensley. That's just a couple blocks away from the elementary school. It happened yesterday shortly after dismissal. A group of kids approached them and started punching and kicking them. Korshonda says her son has been bullied at Wright and claims the administration has not done enough to protect him. Here's what happened yesterday in her own words.
So I asked my kids to come to the next side of the street with me so they wouldn't get jumped. So we kept walking. They followed us all the way there. And then they still fought us. They fought my son. They hit my son first, all in his face. Then they dragged me in the grass and pulled my little baby hair.
Don't even have respect for the little baby, okay? And then if you heard that first video, he said the big kids are not touching him, the little kids are. And it's just so disgusting. And it's the fact that these parents just don't care about their children. These are the children of the women that are partying, the women that worry about how they look. These are the kids that can't read, might I add. And it's just so unfortunate.
Yeah. Listen, man, we're seeing a lot more of this. There's no respect for adults. There's no respect. There's no respect at all because they had no fathers in there teaching them respect. It's the reality of the world we live in, my friends. Guys, we're here as men to come up with solutions. How do we solve this problem that we're now seeing throughout not only the U.S., but it's all over the world? How do we solve this? Let's have a discussion in the comment section, my friends. Of course, remember, links to these 3 videos I will post at the top of the comment section so that you guys can go and watch them. Shout out to the creators. And gentlemen, hey, we're here. How do we fix it? Please like this video on the way out, my friends. Book a session if you need any help with your life, with your business, with your YouTube channel, whatever. The older man is here for you, my friends. Okay? So until tomorrow, remember, whenever in doubt, always, always ask an older man. I'll see you soon. Cheers.